It's a simple topic today, but it's something I think many Rails developers are not aware of, and that has to do with environments. Now, when you generate a new Rails app, you get three environments by default: development, test, and production. Now, these environments aren't really special. There are very few places in the Rails source code that mention a specific environment. What makes them unique is how they're configured in the Rails app itself in these config files. Take this production environment, for example. Here there's a config option to set cache classes to true, so that means the classes will not be reloaded between requests for performance reasons. But in development mode, it's convenient to automatically reload the classes, so that is disabled there. So that's just one difference between production and development, and you can browse through the config to see all the other changes. Now, because there's nothing special about any given environment, you can make as many environments as you want. For example, you may want to add a staging environment, which behaves like production with a few development goodies thrown in. To do so, you can just add a new config file here for that environment. I'll call it staging.rb. Now, since I want it to behave like production, I'll just copy and paste the production config into the staging config file here, and I might change a couple things to make it more developer friendly, such as enabling debug level for the logs. Now, when adding a new environment, you should also check out the various other config files, because there are some that are specific for each environment, such as the database YAML file. There's an entry here for each environment. We can just maybe copy and paste the development environment and use that for the staging environment. We could use the development database if we wanted to, or make a separate staging database for the records, maybe fill it up with a lot of records for testing performance or something. So now with that new environment set up, you can start up the server with that environment by passing the -e option, then the name such as staging. And then you can see it starts up the server in that staging environment. And if you want to start up the console under that environment, you just pass it in as an argument into the Rails console command, just pass in staging, and it will start up the staging environment in the console there. Now, alternatively, you can set the Rails env environment variable and then run any command, maybe a rake task here, or just start up the server like we did before, and that will start it up under that environment as well. So if you wanted to change a default Rails environment, you can export that Rails env setting, and so that way future commands will automatically use that environment. Now, if you have a dedicated machine for that environment, you can just toss that in your .bash profile or .zshrc file, and that will use that environment every time. Now a word about Bundler. You're probably aware that you can go into your gem file and add a group option to load a gem only under a specific environment. So here the Ruby prof gem will only be required inside of the staging environment. Now, don't feel like the gem file groups always need to match a given environment. For example, in Rails 3.1 we have this assets group by default that doesn't match any specific Rails environment. We could name this anything we want, such as profiling, and by default this won't be loaded in any environment. Now, to customize when this group is loaded, check out the application config file. Here you can see there's a bundler require line, and this accepts a list of groups which should be required. And you can see there's a convenient Rails groups method here that basically you can assign given groups to a set of environments. So you could say, for example, that you want the profiling group to be loaded only in the staging and development environments, and that way it will only be required there. Now, the advantage of this approach is that you can add more complex logic here if you want to customize when this group is loaded at runtime, instead of specifying which environment it should be loaded up front in your gem file. And that's all I have for this episode. It's short and sweet, but I hope you found it useful to see how easy it is to add a new environment.